Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to Visalia Unified's College and Career Readiness, Ignite Your Curiosity. Tonight, we're going to explore geology. Before we get started, though, I'd like to go through, a little housekeeping with you guys. First of all, I want to make sure that you are aware of our website, and you can either take a screenshot of your computer right now, or you can take your phone to the QR code and go to our website. On our website, you'll find all kinds of information on college and career, CTE, career technical education courses, and also our linked learning academies. So we hope you take time to explore the website and see what it holds for you and your family. Tonight, as we get started, we'd love to hear questions from the audience. And in order to do so, just go to the bottom of your screen to the Q&A, and you can go ahead and click on that and put your questions in there. And as we go along, we'll try to answer those questions. And then at the end, we'll also give you some time to ask questions as well. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our guest tonight. Elizabeth Chapman is a geologist, and we're going to ask her questions and just figure out what geology is and what career options there are in geology. So Elizabeth, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. This is not your typical career pathway, like we talked earlier. It's not the teacher, doctor, lawyer kind of thing. But in talking to you, I'm really excited to have our students and families hear about what you do and what possibilities that there are for their careers in the future. So let's start with just the basic question. What is geology?
So geology is the study of the earth and all of its processes. So you can have it's weather, it's mining, it's what makes the mountains tall and what makes the valleys low, a lot of hydrogeology, water, how water moves through and cuts through making canyons and those kinds of things, or like the processes that we have, like, you know, I'm sorry, there's geochemistry, there's just a lot. It covers pretty much anything that has to do with the earth and how it works. Plate tectonics, earthquakes, volcanoes, those are typically the things that you think of when you think about geology. Mostly people, you know, when people say, when I say, oh, I'm a geologist, they go, oh, you like rocks? And it's like, yeah, I like rocks, but it's a lot more than that too. You know, it's mostly how those rocks formed, where they came from, and erosion, you know, the basic rock cycle. And yeah, so that's the start. It's such a huge that covers a lot there. So yeah,
I think that's funny that you mentioned that people go, oh, so you like rocks? Because as a child, I remember going to museums and they had geological displays, and it was just rocks.
Yeah,
and some of the rocks were split open. You could see the crystals in the middle. So yeah, I think I associate that also with rocks. So yeah, it's interesting to see where that takes you in terms of a career.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you can branch off into a lot of areas. Can you kind of tell us about your pathway and your different career opportunities?
So right now there are a few different fields in geology that you can get into. You can get into oil and gas, you can get into mining and exploratory geology. I am in environmental geology, which is still relatively new. I think that, you know, it sort of emerged like in the late 80s and 90s. And, you know, more and more there are now like environmental science fields that you can get into, but geology kind of falls under that. So I work in environmental consulting, and I do a lot of groundwater monitoring and remediation. I clean up a lot of sites that have caused, there have been like chemical spills or chemical dumping. I work in a lot of large businesses. So, it takes, keeping society going is kind of a dirty business. And so there's a lot of environmental compliance that goes along with that. And the company that I work for, we help our clients stay in compliance with the, groundwater laws and regulations. And so that's what I do. But there's a lot of different ways you can get into it. There's also, you can get into sort of like geologic engineer, engineering geology. And, also if you, there's hydrology, geochemistry. There's a lot that you can do with a geology degree.
So the geological engineering, would that be, well, I think of like San Francisco in the 1989 earthquake. The part of the city that had the most damage was built on a landfill over kind of on the edge of the city by the water. And so now when you're building in San Francisco, I think they have the geologists come out now and tell you how deep. Is that right? That you have to put
absolutely. That's it's called like a phase 1 investigation. And so you go out and you take a look at the ground, make sure that make sure that it's stable for building. And I mean, people don't even people don't associate a geologist was there before they built. They did surveys, they did studies to make sure that it was safe for houses. The high-speed rail, it takes a lot of geology that's coming through the valley. There's a lot of studies that are being to make sure that it's safe and that that it's structurally sound. And there's nothing like gross or toxic underneath also.
That helps. That helps.
Yeah, that's kind of important too.
And you see so many news stories on water and companies doing dumpings and getting into the water system. And would that also kind of apply to what you're doing right now?
Yeah, that's a lot of what I do. I take care of. Like for example, PFAS is an emerging. It's called a forever chemical, and that was created by DuPont in the 40s, and on the East, somewhere I think in the Ohio River, in that area, it made a lot of people sick, and like. I watched this documentary on it recently, and I think it's in everybody's blood now. So so it's everywhere. It's a forever chemical. They don't really know how they're going to start testing for it over the next 20 years or so. But in my field, we all keep waiting for those regulations to come down, because you find PFAS. It's polyfluoroalkyl substances. Basically just carbons that fluorocarbons, but anyway, they don't really break down. They're hydro, like they line barrels with they Teflon is that they put it in in all of our cooking ware and stuff like that. So it's interesting how to see where that will go in the next few years. But in large doses, it can make a lot of people sick. Currently, like I said, it's in everybody's blood, so we're not really sure, what that means.
The ramifications are.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but so stuff like
slightly
that.
Terrifying.
Yeah, it's a little. Didn't expect that to get this dark.
Sorry.
Here we are.
We'll go in there. So as I hear you talk, I'm hearing words like chemistry and things of that nature. So when you're in college and you're studying geology, what kind of classes are you taking?
So it's I went through a 4-year, just a bachelor's program. You do take the hard sciences, so it is chemistry, physics, and calculus. But you know, the geology, and then you take your geology coursework, which is you know, intro, sedimentology, structural geology. And then so on and so forth based on, you know, what your preferences are and what your, you know, what your electives and whatnot will be. So yeah, it is, you know, it's the heavy hitters, you know, it's definitely not an arts degree, but you know, there's a lot of resources that in school. I personally was not great at math. I was not, you know, I was not exposed to a lot of physics or chemistry when I was in high school. And so it was something that was very new to me when I was going through college. So, but you know, the more you use it, and you know, I didn't think when I was in college I was like, I'm never going to use this, but yeah, I use it all the time. So especially with math, I use a lot of math, you know, in my daily, in my, you know, just going through a day of work. So yeah, I mean, it is kind of heavy, but the actual geology classes are so engaging because you spend a lot of time in because it's a physical science, so you need to be out and physically seeing it. So you do a lot of field trips also. Part of just the curriculum, or I'm not part of your coursework is 2 3-week field camp sessions, so 6 weeks total, where you spend it outside camping. For me, my first one was spent, well, I went to the University of Texas at El Paso, but my first one was spent in the mountains around El Paso. But then my second one was spent a week in northern New Mexico, a week in Colorado, and a week in Utah. And we did field mapping. We did, you know, we looked at a lot of different geologic sites, a lot of outcrops, and a lot of it was just the professor would say, okay, here's a map, find your way out and tell us what happens, you know? And so
Boy Scouts on
yeah.
hormones there.
Yeah, it was pretty intense, but it was awesome. Those are some of the, you know, just those core memories that you know, you'll have forever. So yeah, it's a lot of it. I mean, some of my classes we would spend, you know, it would be like a long weekend. We would have to go a few weekends per semester. And then also they would take us, you know, so every Tuesday and Thursday from 10 to 12, we would be out doing field trips also. So you get to spend a lot of time outside hiking, you know, really in the geology. And that's some of the best way to learn, you know, it's just by doing. And it's definitely, if that's your thing, then geology is amazing. Yeah.
So it kind of goes to the model of watch once, do once, teach once,
Yeah,
get
absolutely.
your hands dirty kind of
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely.
Now, you said that, you know, in high school, you weren't really a strong math person and really didn't do the physics and the deep chemistry. When you were going through college, did you hit some bumps along the way that you thought, do I keep going through this path?
Oh
And
yeah.
what did you do
Oh
to
yeah.
work around that?
Yeah. So, well, when I first started college, I grew up in Porterville. So I started at Porterville College, and I was going for a liberal arts degree. I wanted to be like a journalist, and I had made it pretty far through that. And then I I didn't see a future as I was going through. It didn't excite me. I didn't know what I was going to do. I felt kind of lost in the woods. And then I had taken an intro to geology class as like just an elective, or to fulfill, you know, a credit. And so, and then I fell in love. But yeah, I was never strong. I was never strong in math or science. That was never something that I was like, I mean, I always liked science, but the math part was always like, no, I'm not a mathematician, you know? And there was a point when I was in college, for whatever reason, I could not get through pre-cal. I had such a hard time with pre-cal, and I failed it. And then they gave me an opportunity, if I could take like a 3-week summer course, I could, and I passed it, then they would give me a C. And so I was like, okay, and I worked really hard and I failed that too. And at the end of the summer, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to get through this? Like, am I going to have to drop out of college over pre-cal? You know, like, is this how it's going to work? And it it was really hard. But then, you know, I took it again, and just with the right resources, finally over, you know, that was the third time basically that I had taken it, and I made it through. And then I went on to take Calculus 1 and Calculus 2, and I had no issues. So it just depends, you know, and I think about that a lot, you know. It's kind of funny that you bring that up because, yeah, it was, you know, you get so stuck on thinking that you have to be straight, you know, that you have to have straight A's, that you have to be perfect at everything. And, you know, it's not really like that. There's a lot of, you know, and there's also a lot of resources to help you also, you know. So if I had if I had passed that 3-week course, that would have been a really great thing. But, you know, it doesn't always work like that. So.
And I think your story is very typical. I think, and you're right, students have this perception that they're supposed to go off to college and get straight A's and it's going to be so easy. And then when that first year or second year, they hit those struggles because classes are getting harder and more intense, and you have to up your game. They sometimes mistakenly think that means that they're not supposed to be there, which is really not the case. It just learning to study differently, use, like you said, use your resources. So yeah, that's great for our students to hear, because I think that's more typical than a student going off to college and going, oh yeah, it was easy.
Yeah.
You don't really hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the classes that I took were not things that I was used to. It wasn't something that, you know, that just came naturally to me. A lot of that was not intuitive, you know. It wasn't an easy thing to learn. And so yeah, and also, you know, I think a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on their GPA, and those things are important. I'm not saying they're not important, but you know, when you get out of school, that becomes a lot less important, as far as, you know, you don't want to fail your classes, you want to make it through. But, you know, you don't have to be valedictorian to get a good job, you know.
Yeah. I had a student here the other day that had their doctorate, and they were saying C's get degrees sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to get, if that's all it takes. There's been time, I made it through a physics class and I got a C, and I was just like, whew, like that's a good, you know. There are a few of those classes where you're just like, this is as good as it gets for me, you know. So yeah,
go on.
yeah, I'll take it.
So what was your first job out of college?
My first job out of college, well, first, I spent a couple of weeks working for DirecTV, because I did have a hard time getting a job, but for only like 2 weeks. And then I got recruited by a GPS mapping company that's very similar to Google. Yeah, so I started doing GPS mapping, and so basically what you're thinking, like the Google cars, very, very similar to that. So what we would do is we would just, you know, get in our car. I ran a fleet of vehicles. At first I started in the vehicles doing the mapping, and then I started running the fleet. And so I had a team of cars, and we would go from different state by state. You know, I worked in Texas, I worked in Pennsylvania, Washington State, California, a lot of the South, a lot of like Ohio. We just, you know, we had to do the project was every road in America had to be driven. So yeah, so I spent a lot of time. What's that?
Did you physically drive, or were they automated?
I started driving, but then and then only for a few weeks, and then I started doing the fleet coordinator stuff. And so my talents were better suited, like on the computer, and just kind of making sure that everybody was good, and that the GPS software was running how it was supposed to, and making sure that all of that worked out. So yeah, it was 100% travel, and it was a great opportunity right out of college to see the world, see the country, and just kind of get out on my own. And yeah, it was a really great opportunity, and also it led to open other opportunities because of my background. When you do geology in college, you do a lot of mapping. That's kind of, they just go hand in hand. So because of my mapping experience, and then combined with the GPS mapping that I was doing, I ended up landing my current job, and I started as a geologist, but also a GIS analyst, which is GIS is a type of mapping software. And so, yeah, you never know what, it wasn't exactly geology that I had gotten into, but it sort of went hand in hand. And it was such a great experience, you just kind of never know what's going to pop up, and, you kind of got to take what comes, and, keep an open mind. And it was a wonderful experience.
And I think that's a good point. Sometimes our first job or 2 or 3 jobs out of college isn't necessarily exactly the area that we want, but the skills that we gain and the broader perspective we gain actually makes us a more viable candidate later on as we're applying for the jobs that we really want.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So what are you currently working on? And what does your
So
day look like?
currently, like I said, I'm in environmental consulting. So I work on a few different projects. Mainly, we work in the oil fields doing environmental stuff, making sure mostly that that the oil leases are staying in regulation. Excuse me. We also work in agricultural manufacturing. We make sure that large scale ag plants that make pesticides and fertilizers and stuff like that are staying within their regulations. I also do landfill work. I install, just recently, I've been installing soil vapor wells that will monitor landfill gas to make sure that they're staying within the boundaries of the landfill, making sure that that's not seeping out into surrounding areas.
So like methane, measuring the methane
Yeah,
output, or
there's a few different chemicals that are involved. So, but methane and just yeah, the full suite. I also we I do a lot of kind of weird stuff, but I monitor a meteorological station. I go out and make sure that it's audited and calibrated correctly to make sure that the landfill, when water falling on a landfill is like not good, right? Because when it rains, you do, the water has to be accounted for. So it has its own met station, and we make sure that it stays, that it so they can calculate, what they need to, so that they can take measures to make sure that water is accounted for and not, seeping off somewhere and causing environmental damage.
so do they try to capture the water then so it doesn't
Yeah.
go anywhere else? Okay.
Yeah, they capture it, and then it drains into lined ponds, and then those ponds are monitored, it's handled from there.
Interesting. So what is your favorite part about your job, and what's your least favorite part about your job?
My favorite part about my job is that each site that we work on, and I think we have about 70 sites. Each one is different. So every single day I'm working on something different. As far as, some days I'm working on reports. Today I was trying to schedule some barrels of hazardous waste. They've been sitting for far too long, and I've been trying to get them picked up, and finally they got picked up today, but it was a problem. So that's what I did today. Sometimes it's a little bit boring like that, but yeah, sometimes, it's always something different though, and it's always a problem, and it's a problem that can be solved. That's my favorite part, is that, and then the water, as far as like, I think that water is just amazing. It's such, it's the most destructive force on earth, and it's so powerful, and we have this, we as people, we control it, and we monitor it, and we make sure that, that it's not being harmed, and we direct it to who needs it most. And it's so interesting to me just how we interact with water, this resource, like, one of the things that we need more than anything else. And, we have it's such an integral part of our daily lives. And so that's kind of my favorite part of my job. My least favorite part of my job, what is my least? I really like my job. I don't love every part, I don't love every part of it, but for the most part, yeah, I don't have a lot of negative things to say about it. Sometimes, you don't always, yeah, I don't really have a lot of negative things to say about it.
That's fantastic. So
Yeah.
it sounds like it matches your personality in terms of you like the challenge, you like the problem solving, you like to be out and about, you like to work with people. So lots of skills that seem to be your strengths all kind of pulled into one position. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I guess, you know what, it is a little bit, in consulting, it's a little bit feast or famine. So that is one thing I don't like about it. So right around semi-annual reporting season, or January and August, all of our reports are due. So around those times it gets really, really busy because you have so much to do in such a little amount of time. But then, like, the 2 weeks afterwards, there's nothing scheduled. You know what I mean? Like, you have so little to do. And sometimes it gets a little frustrating because it's like, where was all this? Like, where was this downtime 2 weeks ago? So yeah, that part does get a little bit old. And also but otherwise, that's pretty much it. It is, the interesting thing about geology is it's not just science, it's an art and a science. When you're looking at an outcrop of, so many different types of rocks and layers, you're looking at it and you're trying to figure out what happened here, what happened in this depositional environment. So it was a lake, and then it was a river, and then it was a lake, and then it was, and you can kind of tell, like, where there was a flood here, and it's sort of investigative. You have to really kind of, I love that it's such a physical science, because you can see it's not something that, it's not like quantum, it's not theoretical, it's right there in front of you, and you can see it. And, when somebody explains to you, oh, well, this used to be, there used to be a glacier here, and you can see that by these rocks, and, what's been cut out of, the mountain and whatnot. And you're like, oh yeah, it definitely looks like a glacier's been here, And so, or, when you're headed to the coast and you can see the coastal ranges, and you can see how, the different angles, and, you can see what's happened. You can see the landforms and how they've changed. And I think that's just, like, amazing,
It's kind of like being a detective in a way, and
It is,
telling
yeah,
history.
It is, yeah. It's history, it's art, it's investigation, it's science, it's everything rolled. I mean, it's a lot of things rolled into one.
Very cool. So what would your advice to students be?
Oh, what would my advice to students be? You don't have to know all the answers at once, and just keep an open mind and be willing. And honestly, 90% of getting through college is just showing up for class, and just showing up. You don't have to be great every single day. If you can just make it to class, you'll be okay. It's not it's not as hard as everybody makes it sound. If I can do it, anybody can do it. So
Well, Elizabeth, you've made geology sound very fascinating. I remember taking a geology class in college, and I wish you had been the teacher. That would have been exciting. Maybe I would have followed through a little more. But it's really kind of nice to see that. Also, you going through college, you were on one pathway, but those general ed classes kind of give you that broad range of courses that you get to sample. And it's interesting how that influenced the course that you took.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so when we roll our eyes at the GE classes, like, oh, I have to take this, we need to be open-minded and see what possibilities it might hold for us. So
Yeah,
that's great.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And also, oh, I was going to say something and I lost my train of thought, but yeah, you never know what's going to keep, as far as also, what I remembered. So when I was going to school I wanted to be a journalist, I didn't really see a lot of, I didn't see a lot of options to get a job. There's a lot of competition, and with geology, because there's so many different things you can get into, I read also that it's one of the top, well, I don't know if it is anymore, but it was one of the top 10 most needed jobs at the time. And so, yeah, so I mean, and I did an internship, and the geologist that I was working with, he said, in 2008, when the housing market crashed, he said, if you were willing to travel, the unemployment rate for a geologist was basically zero. I mean, as long as you're willing to move, you can get a job. It's very easy to get a job in this field.
And there aren't many industries that you can say that about.
That
So
is very,
that's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Any other things that you'd like to add in?
I mean, I encourage women to get into STEM fields. I am typically the only girl, so it would be great if there was a lot more female representation. But it's a great field to be in, as if you like being outside. If I definitely recommend it to anybody. It's one of those things also, even if you don't like being outside, you can work in an office, you can work anywhere. So
Perfect. Well, let me ask our audience, if you have any questions, you can go down to the Q&A and type in your questions as we kind of wrap things up here. I haven't seen anything pop up yet. I think you've done a great job of covering everything. Okay, so last question of the night. If you weren't a geologist, what would your next choice be?
Oh, if I wasn't a geologist, what would I be? You know what? I would probably build furniture.
Oh, wow.
That's I like furniture, and I like woodworking, and so I like to work with my hands. And yeah, I would love to, like, if I wasn't a geologist, I would probably get into like restoring furniture and like trying to upcycle and doing that kind of thing.
Okay, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
Yeah, wouldn't that be just great? Just
So in retirement.
yeah, that's what my goals are.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing it with us and sharing such great information to our students. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. And then, like I said, hopefully next year we get to go live again with our Ignite Your Curiosity. And I'll give you a call and see if we can help you out at that event.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Good night.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.